Hello and welcome to Indus News from Islamabad. I'm Jawad and these are the headlines. China says it does not recognize the so-called Union Territory of Ladakh illegally established by India last year. In a news briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin rejected India's move to strip occupied Kashmir of its autonomy. He said China opposes infrastructure buildup in disputed areas for military purposes. The two sides have been engaged in a military standoff in Ladakh since May. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has called for an extension to the G20 debt relief initiative for one more year in the wake of the coronavirus crisis. In a video address to the Financing for Development Summit on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, Khan said the UN should set up an investment facility to mobilize $1.5 trillion annually for developing countries. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 1 million lives and infected over 33 million people. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has once again warned against the spoilers of the Afghan peace process. Addressing a conference in Islamabad, Qureshi said negotiations are the only solution to the Afghan conflict. In his address, the chairman of the Afghan Council for Reconciliation, Abdullah thanked Pakistan for its efforts for peace. Kuwaiti Emir Sabah AlAhmad AlJaber AlSabah has died at the age of 91. In July, AlSabah was flown to the United States for medical treatment following a surgery. The 91-year-old Emir had ruled the country since 2006 and overseen its foreign policy for more than 50 years. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. China says it does not recognize the so-called Union Territory of Ladakh illegally established by India last year. In a news briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin rejected India's move to strip occupied Kashmir of its autonomy. Wang said China opposes infrastructure buildup in disputed areas for military purposes. He warned India against taking any unilateral actions in the border area. The two sides have been engaged in a military standoff in Ladakh since May.
China does not recognize the so-called Union Territory of Ladakh illegally established by India. We also oppose the infrastructure construction in the disputed border areas by the Indian side for the purpose of military control. According to the recent consensus reached between China and India, neither party should take any actions in the border area that would complicate the situation, so as not to hinder the efforts of both parties to ease the situation.
Pakistan has summoned the Indian Shah d'affaires to protest the latest ceasefire violation by Indian troops along the line of control. The summoning comes hours after a soldier and a civilian was martyred and 4 people were wounded in the Indian fighting. The Indian side was told to respect the 2003 ceasefire agreement and allow the UN military observers to visit their side of the line of control. According to the Foreign Office, there have been over 2,300 ceasefire violations by the Indian Army since January. Amnesty International says it is halting work in India due to continuous crackdown and harassment by the government of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The rights group said New Delhi has frozen the bank account of its office in India, forcing it to stop its campaign and research work. Amnesty said agencies have been targeting it for calling for government's accountability over human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. The rights body said it is operating in complete compliance with Indian and international law and has only raised its voice against New Delhi's injustice. Amnesty's executive director, Avinash Kumar, says these measures are an extension of assault by the government on those who speak the truth. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has once again warned against the spoilers of the Afghan peace process. Addressing a conference in Islamabad, Qureshi said negotiations are the only solution to the Afghan conflict. Qureshi said peace in Afghanistan is vital for Pakistan and regional stability. He says ceasefire is necessary for peace, saying only Afghans can determine the future of Afghanistan. In his address, Chairman of the Afghan High Council for National Reconciliation, Abdullah, thanked Pakistan for its efforts for the Afghan peace. He said there are no winners in war and no losers in peaceful settlement. Abdullah said both the countries need to enhance bilateral cooperation in all fields. Armenia and Azerbaijan have accused each other of cross-border shelling far from the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict zone. This comes as the worst spate of fighting since the 1990s rage for a third day. Dozens have been reported killed and hundreds wounded in the clashes. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev said 10 civilians have been killed by Armenian shelling. There was no official information about casualties among Azeri soldiers. According to reports, a total of 59 Armenian soldiers were killed in the fighting. The dispute is centered on the control of the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which is recognized as part of Azerbaijan, but controlled by ethnic Armenians. Iran's Foreign Minister Jabaz Zarif has slammed the UK, France, Germany and the US for pressuring Tehran on human rights abuses. Addressing an event to commemorate Iraq war, Zarif said Germany and the Netherlands provided chemical weapons to Saddam Hussein to use against the Iranian people. He said Iranians will never forget the war crimes of the nations that now claim to champion human rights. Earlier, the UK, France and Germany summoned their Iranian ambassadors in a diplomatic protest of Iran's treatment of dual nationality and political prisoners. Meanwhile, Germany also issued a critical statement on Iran to the UN Human Rights Council on behalf of 47 European countries. Hamas says joint action and intra-Palestinian dialogue is the best way to confront Israel and its sinister schemes. In a statement issued on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of Al-Aqsa Intifada, Hamas rejected any agreement on normalizing ties with Israel. The statement said Palestinians will never stop claiming and fighting for their rights. It urged the Palestinians to frequently visit the Al-Aqsa Mosque in its defense and firmly confront Israeli forces and the settlers. The group said it will unify Palestine as it faces acute dangers by the world's recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. It also slammed the Arab League for failing to reject the normalization deals with Israel, saying organization didn't fulfill its responsibility. Israel's defense forces have demolished 2 residential structures in the West Bank under the pretext of unlicensed buildings. Local media says a unit of Israeli military razed houses with bulldozers in Khirbat Yarza village of Tubas city, displacing their occupants. It says the soldiers also prevented journalists on the scene from covering the demolition and seized Palestinians' television's broadcasting van. The site of the incident is already a marginalized village with most of its lands littered with Israeli landmines. Kuwaiti Emir Sabah AlAhmad AlJaber AlSabah has died at the age of 91. AlSabah died at a US hospital where he was flown in July to receive medical treatment following a surgery. The Emir had been the ruler of the country since 2006 and overseen its foreign policy for more than 50 years. Sheikh Sabah has pushed for diplomacy to solve the regional issues, including the continuing boycott of Qatar by 4 Arab nations. The late Emir has also hosted major donor conferences for war-torn nations such as Iraq and Syria. Sabah was also critical of the Saudi-led military campaign in Yemen and took a strong stand for Palestinian rights. He was expected to be succeeded by his 83-year-old half-brother and Crown Prince Sheikh Nawaf AlAhmad. The United Nations has praised the positive and proactive attitude of opposing parties in Libya during their talks in Egypt. In a statement, the UN support mission in Libya said it has facilitated the talks in the framework of the ongoing 5+5 Joint Military Commission. The UN mission also expressed gratitude to the Egyptian government for making the talks possible. It said the UN expects the outcome of these face-to-face meetings will be mainstreamed into Joint Military Commission. Earlier in June, virtual meetings of the UN-backed Government of the National Accord and the Eastern-based army were held under the auspices of the mission. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has urged Greece and Turkey to continue talks on a maritime dispute as soon as possible. After meeting Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis on the island of Crete, Pompeo said Washington strongly supports the dialogue between the two NATO allies. Pompeo is on a two-day trip to Greece amid increased regional tension over energy exploration rights in the eastern Mediterranean. Greece and Turkey have agreed to resume exploratory talks over contested maritime claims following weeks of tension. In the US, the only police officer charged in the Breonna Taylor's case has pleaded not guilty on 3 counts of wanton endangerment. Former detective Brett Hackinson entered his plea during an audio conference call before Jefferson County Circuit Court Judge Ann Bailey Smith. Judge Smith ordered Hankinson to not possess any guns after his lawyer argued his client may need weapons for self-defense. The other 2 officers were not charged after Kentucky's Attorney General Daniel Cameron concluded their use of force was justified. A grand jury indicted only Hankinson with endangering Taylor's neighbors during the botched March 13 raid on her apartment. South Korea says its fisheries official killed at the Korean waters last week was trying to defect to North Korea. At a briefing, a South Korea's Coast Guard inquiry chief said the claim was based on military intelligence, analysis of tidal current, and other circumstantial evidence. The official said the tidal current on September the 21st suggests the victim could not have reached where he was found unless he swam to get there. He said the North Korean authorities were aware of the official's personal credentials such as his name, age, hometown, and height. The official said an accident or a suicide is very unlikely as the official was wearing a life jacket, but the investigators are not ruling out such scenarios. Earlier, Pyongyang said it shot at a man intruding into the North's waters and burned the floating material, carrying the man in an attempt to contain the spread of COVID-19. Hungary has demanded the resignation of the European Union's Vice President Věra Jourová over the critical remarks about the country. In a letter to the EU President Ursula von der Leyen, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán rejected the criticism. Jourová had remarked that a sick democracy is being built in Hungary. She said Hungarian nationals are not in a position to form an independent opinion. Orbán termed the words as insulting and unacceptable, asking Jourová to step down. The global number of COVID-19 deaths has topped 1 million, while over 33.3 million people have been infected. The deaths in the US, India, and Brazil make up nearly half the total fatalities. More in this report.
Deaths from COVID-19 have doubled from 500,000 in just 3 months. According to Johns Hopkins, 1 person died in every 32nd. Infection numbers are rising again in the United States and setting new records in various countries worldwide. But US President Donald Trump continues to demonize restrictions of any form, claiming his administration has slashed the mortality rate by 85%.
Excess mortality compares total deaths during a pandemic to what we would be expected in a normal year. This is a critical measurement because it includes undetected China virus deaths along with deaths resulting from lockdowns. And lockdowns can be very harmful. And we have too many states that are locked down right now. The governors are, nobody knows what the governors are doing actually.
The rise of the second wave in Western Europe has forced states to consider reimposing restrictions amid rising infections. The UK has tightened its lockdown in northeast England, making it illegal for people from different households to mix. But the ailing economy has forced many countries to lift restrictions despite skepticism regarding the resurgence of the virus. In his message on the global death toll hitting 1 million, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres dispelled the notion that the pandemic is over.
And still there is no end in sight to the spread of the virus, the loss of jobs, the disruption of education, the upheaval of our lives. We can overcome this challenge, but we must learn from the mistakes. Responsible leadership matters, science matters, cooperation matters, and misinformation kills.
The WHO has also warned the pandemic still needs major control interventions. The World Health Body also announced the distribution of 120 million rapid test kits for low and middle income countries.
In Pakistan, 8 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, raising the death toll to 6,474. The Health Ministry says 672 more tested positive overnight, with over 8,700 total active cases in the country. The ministry said out of over 311,000 detected cases, 296,000 have recovered so far. It said more than 136,000 cases have been detected in Sindh province, while over 99,000 have been reported in Punjab so far. In the federal capital Islamabad, close to 16,500 people have tested positive for the disease since the outbreak. India has deployed heavy security measures in Lucknow ahead of a special court's verdict in a criminal case over the demolition of Ayodhya's Babri Mosque in 1992. With the trial now concluded, this report takes a peek at this decades-old story of state-backed religious persecution and injustice.
Hindu mobs demolished the century-old Babri Mosque on December 6, 1992, based on a historical fallacy that it was built on the ruins of a temple for Hindu deity Lord Ram. Authorities say around 1,800 people were killed in riots in the aftermath of the demolition that India's Supreme Court has described as an egregious violation of the rule of law. The matter was challenged in court and awaits judgment for the past 20 years, even after the Supreme Court ordered a day-to-day hearing in 2017. The 32 accused on trial include former Deputy Prime Minister L.K. Advani, former Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Kalyan Singh, and other ruling Bharatiya Janata Party leaders. The police registered 2 FIRs, one against hundreds of thousands of unknown rioters who climbed atop the mosque with hammers and axes, while the other named several BJP leaders for stoking hate and criminal conspiracy to destroy the religious site. Out of thousands of witnesses, only 351 appeared before the court, largely out of fear of Hindutva extremists.
In India, a 19-year-old Dalit woman has died after she was gang raped by 4 upper caste men, sparking outrage in the country. The woman was admitted to a hospital in New Delhi 2 weeks ago with several serious injuries. The incident took place on the 14th of September in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh. Police told local media that the 4 men had dragged the victim to a field in Hathras district where they raped her. The news of her death has rather prompted many in India to take to social media and demand justice. Rape and sexual violence have been under the spotlight in India since 2012, when a 23-year-old girl was gang raped. This led to huge protests and changes to the country's rape laws, but there has been no sign of crimes against women abating. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. 3 people have been killed in the raging fire in Northern California, which has destroyed 146 buildings and charred 31,000 acres of land. California Governor Gavin Newsom said a separate blaze, glass fire in Napa Valley, has grown to 11,000 acres overnight. California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection said over 70,000 residents have been advised to evacuate. More than 1,000 firefighters are battling the glass fire as authorities investigate the cause of the blaze. Pacific Gas and Electric Company says over 100,000 homes and businesses have suffered power outages across Northern California since Sunday.
A substantial number of structures have been damaged, wineries and other structures in and around the area. Familiar evacuation orders and challenge right now that's been made more acute because of overnight winds. Those winds will maintain themselves. They'll begin to dissipate later in the afternoon, stabilize overnight, which should help with our efforts to take advantage of those conditions and move to advance our containment efforts.
This year's fire season in the U.S. has killed 29 people in California over the past 30 days, while 10 have died in Oregon and Washington. Now moving on, the death toll from flooding in Sudan has risen to 138. Interior Ministry says 56 people have been injured in the heavy downpours, while more than 600,000 have been displaced. The ministry added more than 100,000 homes have been partially or completely destroyed due to floods. Earlier this month, Sudan Security and Defense Council declared a national state of emergency for 3 months. A designer in Thailand is throwing his support for the pro-democracy movement through his new version of school uniforms. More about his new school collection in this report.
In Thai classrooms, showing a rebellious or creative streak through what you wear is difficult. School uniform rules are strict down to how pupils' hair should be cut and the type of socks and shoes they are allowed to wear. But as students around the country push back against what they call archaic rules and join a broader pro-democracy movement, a young clothing designer is throwing his support behind them in a colorful way. Kin Tanspoon has taken the typical uniform for girls and boys and blown them up into exaggerated versions with huge collars and sleeve ruffles.
The uniform is not an indication that tells how students will turn out in the future. You can't just use the outdated values to say that a student is good because they follow the correct attire. If they're not properly dressed, the student would be deemed unruly and bad. You can't measure them like that.
Kin's collection, called Rule Breakers, is based on the Dowdy uniform that is made to order and can be worn by anyone. But his creations are not just for fashion, in hopes that his designs would also help change the mindset of people.
In the end, the uniforms that break away from traditional structures, although they still resemble uniforms, they are creative. I want to support kids so they can be as creative as they can.
Kin's out-of-the-box designs have caught the attention of intimate women's apparel brand, Cole, and they now are collaborating to create a ready-to-wear uniform. The exclusive collaboration has just been launched in June, with prices ranging from $100 to $475 a piece.
More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Huawei's chief financial officer has appeared at a Canadian court as her lawyers resume their fight to block the U.S. efforts to extradite her. Meng Wanzhou was arrested in December 2018 on a warrant from the United States. She was charged with bank fraud for misleading HSBC about Huawei's business dealings in Iran. Her lawyers will argue that the U.S. extradition request was flawed because it omitted a key evidence. They will contend that Meng did not lie to HSBC about Huawei's business in Iran. Meng says she is innocent and is fighting extradition from a house arrest in Vancouver. The arrest has strained China's relations with both the US and Canada. European markets have declined, pulling back from Monday's rally with Brexit talks and the first US presidential debate on investors' radar. The pan-European stock 600 has dropped 0.5%, with banks shedding over 1%. London's FTSE and Frankfurt's DAX have lost 0.5%, while Italy's FTSE MIB also slipped. Paris's CAC 40 traded marginally lower at the end of the day. Earlier Asian markets traded mixed. Chinese, South Korean and Japanese shares gained, while Hong Kong's and Australia's ASX 200 dipped. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.